which boldness on their behalf, right? To look at God and demand something, right? You imagine that as a kid. You imagine ever looking at your parents and trying to tell your parents, hey, I demand this, right? Some of you in here were like, yeah, no, that wouldn't happen. And sometimes you go out in public and you see kids doing that now and you're like, I can't believe they're getting away with that. Right? But Israel demands, and my Bible explicitly says that, demands for a king, and God tries to warn them, but at the end eventually says, what? Fine. I'll give you what you asked for, but, and we kind of take from that of, can't say he didn't warn them, right? Because he laid out what the rights of the king would be, what the king could do, not just to them, but with their stuff and with their kids and all of these things. And at the end of it, they still say what? We want the king. And you can almost imagine God giving them this sort of, all right, I'm going to give you what you want, but don't complain afterwards. Right? You got what you asked for. And so now we get to the point that God has said he's going to give them what they want. And as we were talking with the kiddos, he's not just going to put any person in that position. He's not just going to find the first Israelite that comes along and stick them in the position of leadership. He's still going to take care of his people with the person that's going to sit in that role. And as we look today at the beginning of Saul as the first king of Israel, it's easy for us in our understanding of Saul and our study of him to only think about the end of the story with him, right? That it ends badly. And so often we think about stories, and that's what we think about. We think about the end, right? Oh, it started with such potential and ended in disaster. But the reality for us as we start thinking about this is God called Saul to the kingship for a reason. As much in the same way God calls us to things in our lives for a reason, but then he still gives us that dreaded word that messes all of us up, right? He still gives us choice, right? And how many of you would say that you like choices? And the reality for most of us is we say, much like change, right? These dreaded C words. We say that we like change until it happens to us. And you say that you like choices until what? Until you are given multiple choices. And then what happens? You can't make a decision. Right? I mean, how many of you would go or still go to the buffet, whether it's Golden Corral or the Chinese food buffet or whatever, and what do you get? The same things you get all the time. Right? Or the same stuff you eat at home usually. How often do you go and you're like, man, I've never tried that before, I want to try it. More often than not, what happens is you go there and you're like, well, I don't know if I'm going to like it, so I don't try. Right? My family and I, we're cruise people, obviously. That's our vacation of choice. And sometimes they throw weird things on the menu. If you've ever run on a cruise, you know one night, there's 2 nights on the cruise that a lot of people look out for. Number 1, there is a night that they serve escargot, which for those of you that don't know is snails. I have never tried them. I refuse to try them because I don't want to. Right? But there's another night that people look forward to, and that's frog leg night. They serve frog legs, and you hear people, and I have tried this one, and I didn't like it, so I don't try it anymore. But I hear people say all the time, oh, they taste like chicken. And I say, no, they don't. They taste like frog. Taste like frog. So I stay away from it. Right? But when presented with choices, some of us will choose to do nothing. Right? And Saul is going to be given some choices to make throughout his kingship that we'll be discussing over the next few weeks. And in some ways, he's going to choose very wisely. And in some ways, he's going to mess up all the way. Right? What does that make him? Human. Just like us. The problem is Saul is being put in a position of power, in a position of leadership, where when his choices go sideways, it goes sideways for everybody. And so we look at the beginning here. 1 Samuel 9 says this: there was an influential man of Benjamin named Kish, son of Abel, son of Zerah, son of Bechereth, son of Appiath, son of a Benjamite. He had a son named Saul, an impressive young man. There was no one more impressive among the Israelites than he. He stood a head taller than anyone else. Right? So one of those that when he walked in a room, everybody knew, hey, there's Saul, right? Just looking over everybody, taller than everybody, all of these different things. And it says, verse 3, One day the donkeys of Saul's father Kish wandered off. Kish said to his son Saul, "Take one of the attendants with you and go look for the donkeys." Saul and his attendant went through the hill country of Ephraim. They went through the region of Shalashakes, and they did not find them. They went through the region of Shalom, nothing. Then they went through the Benjamite region, but still didn't find them. So these dudes are going on a journey to try to find these donkeys, right? Where for most of us, I can tell you right now, if the animals get out, most of us today are not going to go over multiple counties or states looking for them, are you? Right? You're going to look around your neighborhood, and then you're going to get on next door, and you're going to say, "Hey, I'm missing some animals. If you find them, let me know." Right? Well, secretly, some of you are like, "I'm not even going on next door. That's a food bill that has gone down," right? Somebody else's problem. So meanwhile, Saul and this servant are hunting for these donkeys. And then verse 5, it says, when they came to the land of Zuph, Saul said to the attendant who was with him, "Come on, let's go back, or my father will stop worrying about the donkeys and start worrying about us." Saul's way of saying what? Hey, we've been at this for a while. We need to get back and let everybody know that we're okay, but we haven't yet found what we're looking for. Verse 6, "Look," the attendant said, "there's a man of God in this city who is highly respected. Everything he says is sure to come true. Let's go there now. Maybe he'll tell us which way we should go." So the attendant thinking what? Hey, this man of God, if we go there, he might tell us what? Where are the donkeys? Where'd they go? We could get this answer that we're looking for. And I imagine the attendant here, partly because the man of God, and he trusts that what he says is true. The other part of that is the attendant wants to be able to go back and tell the father, "Hey, we did everything we could. We exhausted every resource available to us to accomplish the goal you put out for us, but we just weren't able to do it." Because like most of us, you don't want to go back to the boss and say, "Hey, I failed at what you called me to do. What you told me to do, I failed." And when the boss says, "Well, did you try everything?" Well, not everything. I mean, I tried most of it. I was 90%. I tried 90% of everything, and I just didn't do the last 10%. You want to go back and say what? I did everything I could. Right? You imagine that with yourself or a loved one in the hospital. You don't want the doctor to come in the room and go, "Well, we tried a lot, but just we got tired and decided we just wanted to give up. So we just ignored the last 10% of what could have helped your loved one," right? You want the doctor to come out and tell you what? We did everything we could. Everything possible. Right? And so verse 7 says, "Suppose we do go," Saul said to his attendant, "what do we take the man? The food from our packs is gone. There's no gift to take the man. What do we have?" And the attendant said to Saul, "Here, I have a piece of silver. I'll give it to the man of God, and he will tell us our way." Because, and this verse 9 covers why this had to happen. Because formerly in Israel, a man who was going to inquire of God would say, "Come, let's go see the seer." And the prophet of God, formerly called the seer, he would take a gift to that person, right? If you got something from them, you would give something in return for that. And so verse 10, "Good," Saul replied to his attendant, "Come on, let's go." They went to the city where the man of God was, and as they were climbing the hill to the city, they found some young women coming out to draw water and asked, "Is the seer here?" The women answered, "Yes, he's ahead of you. Hurry, he just now came to the city because there's a sacrifice for the people at the high place today. If you go quickly, you can catch up with him before he goes to the high place to eat. The people won't eat unless he comes because he must bless the sacrifice. After that, the guests can eat. Immediately go. You can find him now." Obviously, the name Samuel hasn't come up yet. We know that Saul is getting ready to run into Samuel. That's who he's going to see here. And they're told, "Hey, go quickly. You've got to catch him because this is what's going to happen." Why is Samuel even going to this? Because God has told Samuel that the future king of Israel will be revealed to him here. Right? So we have these two people coming to the same place for different reasons, but God using it for his purpose. Continuing on. Saul and his attendant were entering the city when they saw Samuel coming towards them on his way to the high place. Now the day before Saul's arrival, the Lord had informed Samuel, "At this time tomorrow I will send you a man from the land of Benjamin. Anoint him ruler over my people Israel. He will save them from the hand of the Philistines because I have seen the affliction of my people, for their cry has come to me." When Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, here is the man I told you about. He will rule over my people. And so you imagine Samuel here, he gets that message, hey, this is the guy. This is the guy. Right? Now, if you're Samuel, what do you do with this information? Do you go to Saul and say, hey, God just told me you're the king. Congratulations. Right? Imagine you're Saul in that situation. If Samuel comes up to you and goes, hey, I'm Samuel, you're Saul, God just told me you're the new king of Israel. Congratulations. How do you take that news? Right? I think like most people, you'd start laughing. Right? I will speak to the education world in this. It's one of the areas I know. In the education world, sometimes this looks like you get a phone call that says, hey, you know you taught this grade, now you're going to teach this grade in this subject. And for some people, they hear that and they go, okay, I'm fine with that. For other people, they hear that and say, what? They go into a panic. I can't do that. I won't do that. They refuse. All of these different things, right? So for Saul, it's that same thing. He's going to take it one way or the other, but we see what happens here. Saul approached Samuel in the gate area and asked, would you please tell me where the seer's house is? I am the seer, Samuel answered. Go up ahead of me to the high place and eat with me today. When I send you off in the morning, I'll tell you everything that's in your heart. What a loaded statement, right? I would love, this is one of those moments where you kind of love to go back and be a fly on the wall or a third party to watching this, knowing what we know, right? Because we know that Samuel is about to tell this guy, you're the new king of Israel. Meanwhile, Saul just wants to know what? Where are the donkeys? Saul's entire thought in this is, where are the donkeys? That's all he's thinking about. Right? Which for us, in our walk with God, our own walk with God, how often is that the case with us? That in our minds with God, we're like, God, I just have this really simple thought. Where are the donkeys? I just need to find the donkeys. Meanwhile, God's saying what? Hey, I'm about to set you up to do all this other stuff. If we're just willing to do what? Listen. We're just willing to listen and do what we've been told to do. Right? And so this double meaning here, right? Where Samuel's telling, hey, I'm going to tell you everything that's in your heart. Saul probably hears that as, okay, I'm going to go eat with Samuel and then he'll tell me where the donkeys are and I'll go on my way. Meanwhile, Samuel's going, I'm about to change this dude's entire existence because God has told me he is the king. Verse 20. As for the donkeys that wandered away from you 3 days ago, don't worry about them because they've been found, and who does all Israel desire but you and your father's family? And so we think about that for a minute, right? We don't know to this point that Saul has even brought up the donkeys. Meanwhile, Samuel turns around and says what? Hey, don't worry about them anymore. That's taken care of. As God does in our own lives, so often we get caught up in things that to us seem huge. How many times have you had problems in your life that seem utterly massive and unconquerable? But to God, it is what? It is nothing. To Saul in this moment, everything in his existence is all about these donkeys. That's his job. Go get the donkeys, bring the donkeys back. That's what he's been told to do. That is his everything. Meanwhile, we see here in Samuel, as you look, if you go back in the original language, it's almost kind of like offhand that Samuel turns around and goes, oh, hey, don't sweat the donkeys. They're already home. Right? And you imagine Saul in that moment almost, I can imagine going, how did he know I was here for donkeys? Not only that, how does he know they're home? Right? All of these things happening around Saul in the moment because God has anointed Saul for something else. As much as we think about Saul at the end of his story, having the hand removed and all of that, there's a beginning to this story that we're at now where Saul was the anointed king. And the same way for us, God calls us to things and calls us to do things in a certain way. Saul's job was to lead Israel as God called him to do it. And as we're going to see going forward, Saul's going to slip from that in the future. But for us, the same thing. God has called us to ministries and to do things as He has called us to do them. And it is up to us to serve in that way as He has called us to. Right? What's the problem in our ministries? Us. We are the problem. Right? When we decide that we think it should go this way, it should look like this way, we think it should be this. Instead of seeking out what it is God has, we decide that we think we know better. And the minute we start to put ourselves in that position as we know better, we begin to get further and further away from what it is God has for us to do. And I love Saul's response here, right? Because Samuel makes this statement at the end, who does Israel desire but you and all your father's family? Right? And Saul responded, am I not a Benjamite from the smallest of Israel's tribes? Isn't my clan the least important of all the clans of the Benjamite tribe? Why have you said something like this to me? Right? Saul's response, very clear here, right? Who am I? Right? I'm from the smallest tribe of the smallest clan. Why would you say something like that to me? Which in our walk with God here as a believer, is that not exactly who God would use? Because when Israel asks for a king, what Israel's going to assume is, well, he's going to go to the most wealthy tribe and he's going to pick the most connected person there to be our leader. Is that, God doesn't do that. Who does God use? God uses the one that everybody would look at and say, what? Not him. So it makes perfect sense that God would go to the smallest tribe, to the smallest clan in that tribe and say, him. Him. He's the one. So that even for us, when God uses us, so that we would not be tempted to stand up somewhere and say, yes, I did this. This is me. It's what I talk about as far as being a pastor or being able to speak up here, right? You've heard me say this throughout my entirety of ministry. When I was in high school and had to take public speaking, they gave me a C so they wouldn't have to see me again. I wanted nothing to do with public speaking. Wanted nothing to do with talking in front of crowds. It wasn't until God said, this is what I have for you to do. And I went, yeah, I'm really not good at that. And God says what? Yeah, I am. In the same way he speaks to Moses and others, right? When we try to tell God, hey, I'm not good at this. I'm not fit for this. I can't do this. God says, yeah, I am. I am good at the things you're not. I am strong in the areas where you're not. And guess what? I'm going to show my glory through you. But there is a requirement on us that when God does those things is that we would turn around and say, this is not me. This is not who I am. This is who God made me into. Right? I didn't spend my existence as a child looking in the mirror going, someday I'm going to be the pastor of the church. I didn't do that. I did like I wore basketball jerseys and pretended to be Michael Jordan or Larry Bird. Right? For those younger ones in here, those are basketball players. Yeah, you can stop. Right? So that's what I did as a kid. Right? I pretended to do those things. It wasn't until God got a hold of my life and said, this is what I have for you, that I said, well, that's great, but I don't do those things. And God says, you do now because I'm going to give you the gifts and abilities. I'm going to pour through you. And the same way here's Saul saying that, right? I'm from the smallest clan and the smallest tribe. None of that matters when God is going to use you for something. Some of you in here are saying the same things, right? I'm not good enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. You're right. None of us are. None of us are good enough. None of us are talented enough. None of us are well-spoken enough. None of us are good enough on our own. But the most wonderful thing happens when God calls you. He takes all of your weakness, puts himself in that place, and turns it into strength. He gives of himself so that others could see God through you. And it's then that we have to turn around and say, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with him working through us. Verse 22, Samuel took Saul and his attendants, brought them to the banquet hall, and gave them a place at the head of the 30 or so men who had been invited. Then Samuel said to the cook, get the portion of meat I gave you and told you to set aside. The cook picked up the thigh and what was attached to it and set it before Saul. Then Samuel said, notice that the reserved piece is set before you. Eat it because it was saved for you for this solemn event at the time I said I've invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel that day, and afterwards they went down from the high place of the city, and Samuel spoke with Saul on the roof. They got up early, just before dawn. Samuel called to Saul on the roof, "Get up, I'll send you on your way." Saul got up, and both he and Samuel went outside, and as they were going to the edge of the city, Samuel said to Saul, "Tell the attendant to go ahead of us. You stay for a while, and I'll reveal the word of God to you." And so the attendant went on. And we're going to jump down here into verse 10, or into chapter 10 just a little bit. And we see Samuel took the flask of oil, poured it on Saul's head, kissed him, and said, "Hasn't the Lord anointed you ruler over his inheritance?" And we'll look at 2 real quick. It says, "Today when you leave me, you'll find 2 men at Rachel's grave in Zelzah in the land of Benjamin. They will say to you, 'The donkeys you went looking for have been found, and now your father has stopped being concerned about the donkeys and is worried about you, asking what I should do about my son.'" And so we see here, Samuel gets that message. He's anointed and told, God's made you the ruler. If you're Saul at this point, and if I was Saul at this point, I have a lot of questions. Right? He's never been king. He doesn't know necessarily what it takes to be king. But now all of a sudden he's just found out he's the guy. Right? The closest analogy I have is when I started my teaching journey, right? The first time I went into a classroom when I started teaching 6th grade, I went to Lila Junior High, and I remember one of the first things they said to us. I walked into the classroom and they said, "Hey, get into Ascender and put all your assignments in there and make sure you have all your grades set for what the grades are going to be." And mind you, when I started teaching 6th grade in Lila ISD, all of the core teachers that year were brand new teachers to Lila. They weren't all new teachers. We weren't all brand new teachers, but we were all new to the district. So they take the 4 of us and they said, "Hey, go in Ascender, put your assignments in, and just go." And all of us walked away and looked at each other and went, "What's Ascender? How does that work?" Right? For those of you that don't know, Ascender is the program that Lila uses for all of its grades and attendance, and it's a nightmare program. Right? And so it's just one of those things that once you learn how to use it, it works fine. But I remember the 4 of us sitting there, and finally one of us had to do what? Well, we tried. He said ask. We tried. Nobody was answering. So eventually, I went to Google. How does this work? And I learned how to use it through teaching myself in Google, and then went and showed other people how to do it. Much like Saul here going, I got some questions. I don't know how to be a king. The good news is Saul is not going to have to use Google because he's going to have access to God. In the same way for our lives today, when God calls you to do something, we don't have to Google the instructions because He will give you the instructions necessary. And so the challenge for us today is, I'm going to tell you this. God has something, God has a purpose and a ministry and a call on each and every one of your lives. For some of you, God has told you what that is, and you keep saying the words, well, I don't know, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not that. You're right. You don't know. And you're probably not good enough. But He is. Trust Him. It is time for us as believers, because I hear this a lot from Christians, right? Oh, I want the world to be better. I want people to know about God and to learn about Him. Great. That means God's called you to do that. He's called all of us to do that. It is time for every single one of us to embrace the ministry God has given us and serve Him to the best of our ability. You've heard me say this before, and I'll continue to say it. We don't need Christians who are going to sit on the sidelines anymore. It is time for every single one of us as believers to get in the game. I don't know if you've looked around the world lately, but it's not getting better. And for those of you thinking it's going to get better, I got news for you. The book tells us very clearly it's not. The Bible tells us this world will not get better. It will only continue to get worse. And if we know that, well, then there's a challenge on us as believers is to do everything we can to see as many people saved as possible before God says the words to us, welcome, good and faithful servant. No more of us sitting on the sideline waiting for someone else to do it. Waiting for well, when so-and-so goes, then I'll follow them. No. Get in the game. Let us pray. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for the ability to study your word. And God, we thank you that you didn't just pick some random person, God. You picked Saul for a purpose. You picked Saul to be the leader of your people. But we know there was a challenge on Saul after this, and his job was going to be to seek you as he served the people. Ultimately, as we study, we're going to see where he failed in this. But God, I pray that we would be the people that you have called. That we would seek you with everything that we have. That we would accomplish the purposes you have set forth in our life. That we would be the ambassadors of the gospel you have called us to be. The purpose you have for each and every one of these lives in this room, God, I pray that we would do what it is you've called us to do. That we would serve as you have called us to serve. That we would seek you for all the answers that we need, because you hold all the answers that we need. It's in your name we pray.